If you guys don't know what Pokémon is, you're in need of some serious remedial toy education.
Pokémon is an undeniable obsession with children across the country.
It's the biggest thing from Japan since the Power Rangers. Pokémon is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Pokemon Go hasn't even been out a week and already it's a viral phenomenon.
The app has already soared to the top of the download charts and added $7 million in market value to Nintendo.
Pokémon TCG Pocket is a massive, massive success, estimated to have made $120 million in 3 weeks.
How is Pokemon so popular? I mean, it was a little game that came out in the 90s, and it's just as popular now as it has ever been. To figure out this question, I wanted to look at the history of Pokemon and how it has managed to sustain this popularity over all this time. So let's start at the beginning.
Where can you catch all 150 Pokemon? On your Game Boy, that's where. Pokemon for Game Boy is here. With both packs, you can catch them all.
Pokemon's first appearance was on the Game Boy console, bringing a fresh take on the RPG genre, a role-playing game. But to talk about this, we're gonna have to go back to the real beginning.
Challenge your imagination to come alive and to battle with the creatures of Dungeons and Dragons.
One of the first role-playing games that were commercially available. The role-playing aspect of Dungeons & Dragons means that a player needs to act as their character while playing the game. A more realistic example of the D&D experience would be from the first episode of Stranger Things.
It is almost here. What is it?
What if it's the Demogorgon? Oh Jesus, we're so screwed if it's the Demogorgon.
It's not the Demogorgon.
They act as if they're in real danger.
The Demogorgon is tired of your silly human bickering. It stops towards you. Boom!
When in reality, they're in their mom's basement and nothing could really happen to them. Right? But while the role-playing part of the game doesn't really apply to the newer RPG games, the style of gameplay still does. And this style consists of turn-based combat and a team/party that you would play with. And in the context of Dungeons & Dragons, these other players would be your friends. But translating both the turn-based combat and the party aspect over to the video game medium would prove to be difficult due to the technological capabilities of the late 70s. But not impossible. And in 1975, PDIT 5 was born, known to be one of, if not the first, RPG video game ever made. It reintroduced many of the concepts from the tabletop Dungeons & Dragons game, such as attributes and turn-based combat. It wasn't until Wizardry, 6 years later, in 1981, that would introduce the concept of a whole party being played by one person. But the party members would have to be created beforehand by the player, diminishing both its replayability, having to create each character and its attributes individually, and its story, if it had one. But this party system was improved another 12 years later in 1987, when Megami Tensei, the predecessor to the Persona games, would release and introduce a unique party system, where instead of making your party, the game would give you opportunities to grow your party as the game progresses. They do this by giving you the ability to get a chance to talk with the monsters you would normally fight, and potentially add them to your party. And while these games would try to implement a story, it wouldn't be until Final Fantasy IV that a fully fleshed out story would be implemented, changing the RPG genre forever. And it would be the contribution of these 4 video games and their inspiration from Dungeons & Dragons that would lead to the birth of Pokémon. With the exploration of Dungeons & Dragons, the party system from Megami Tensei, and the storytelling of Final Fantasy IV, it was no doubt that this game was going to be something special that nobody had seen before. And it was. People loved it. It became a commercial success, selling over 1 million copies in its first week in Japan, and it grew exponentially from there. By capitalizing on its success and building on the already popular video game, Pokemon's popularity and revenue skyrocketed. First by releasing merchandise, its most lucrative section, with clothes, backpacks, toys, and its most popular merchandise, the trading card game, better known as TCG, with cards that can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, showing how popular it really is. After the release of TCG, a manga was released based on the games called Pocket Monsters, Pokemon's original name. But it's a really obscure piece of Pokemon history, as not many copies are available anymore, and none were sold in the US. Despite all of Pokemon's expansions, none boosted its popularity more than the anime. But this boost doesn't just happen on its own, and it's not entirely because of the marketing either. A game could have insane marketing and still do poorly, so the product itself has to be good. And it wasn't just good, it was amazing. And it was because of 3 simple reasons: collecting, connecting, and competing. These 3 things are what make up Pokémon, making it easy to implement into different areas and still thrive. Obviously, the first pillar of Pokémon is collecting, as its Pokémon slogan, gotta catch 'em all. And that's what the Pokémon games are based off of, collecting. Pokémon's creator, Satoshi Tajiri, used to collect bugs when he was a kid. And as an adult, he realized that kids weren't having the same experience he was, and he wanted to show it to the newer generation, so he invented Pokémon. Humans have this strong desire to explore and find new things, and Satoshi found a fun way to fulfill that need. And it's this need to find and collect every Pokémon that keeps people hooked. But collecting every Pokémon would be almost impossible without trading.
You can't catch all 150 Pokémon by yourself.
So close.
You need a friend to trade with.
And trading connects people in a way I've only seen with Pokémon. Trading is a cornerstone to playing Pokémon, both in the trading card game, right there in its name, and the video game, as it's been available ever since it came out on the Game Boy. And its ability to trade with other people helped Pokémon explode even more, as every kid would start talking about their coolest, rarest Pokémon, and other kids would want to trade, and the kids that didn't own it would start playing and collecting. But what can you do with all these Pokémon that you've traded and collected? And this was another basis for the Pokémon series: battling. Competing with your Pokémon is the whole reason you collect and trade Pokémon, to have the strongest team possible. And you could battle your friends to really see who is the best like no one ever was. And it was these 3 basic ideas that allows Pokémon to spread throughout the whole world and throughout every medium available. And it spread like crazy. And this was known as Pokemania.
It's on the craze that has now hit Hollywood.
Starting in 1998, when Pokémon exploded in popularity. It was the conjunction of all the Pokémon mediums and its recent export into the US that caused this massive boost. But it wouldn't last long, as only 2 years later, in the turn of the millennium, due to the bad press and the kids who played it growing up, Pokémon's popularity would decrease. Although it wouldn't completely cease to exist, as it was just too big to fail now, with the release of new cards and new games. But it would never reach the popularity and momentum it had when it first came out. That would be true until a resurgence of Pokemania in the summer of 2016 with the release of Pokemon Go. It was a cultural phenomenon, peaking at around 232 million monthly players in the summer of 2016. It became so popular because, just like the trading card game, it was a social game. You had to go outside to even play the game, and interacting with people was the best way to find new Pokemon.
Dragonite! Dragonite!
But as time went on, and just like the first Pokemania, the popularity decreased, now with only close to 90 million players. But this has not stopped them from making money, as it's estimated this app makes around $1 billion yearly. And they can do this by their constant innovation and renovation of the Pokemon franchise and adapting it to modern times. And another good example of this, and the latest release from the Pokemon Company, is Pokemon Pocket. Capitalizing on the popularity of its trading card game by putting the experiences in an app. As fun as the Pokemon trading card game is, it is a very expensive hobby. That doesn't stop some people, but for the casual Pokemon fan, that will definitely discourage them from buying. So Pokemon Pocket takes the money aspect of the trading card game and throws it out the window, now with 2 free packs daily. This is not an ad, by the way, I just really like the game. And with 60 million players and over $400 million made, it seems like other people are enjoying the game as well. Now, with Pokemon's history laid out, we can see how it's been able to build and keep its popularity for almost 30 years, with its ups and downs of course. And we can see clearly what makes Pokemon so famous, with its innovative idea and its introduction into the RPG world, the cute and cool Pokemon, and most importantly, its core principles, which every Pokemon product embraces: collecting, connecting, and competing.